Hi everyone, today's video is on how I achieved 6 distinctions or 90 out of 90 rank points or straight A's for my A-levels in my subject combination. It was BCME, Bio, Chem, Math, Econs, and the compulsory general paper as well as project work. My first pro tip for you is do not be consistent. Yes, as always, I'm not a very conventional student. And I will not give you the please be consistent and study all the time advice because I wasn't a consistent student and still I managed to score well. On hindsight, my strategy was quite ideal, I would say, if you are the sort of person who can take stress. For the first year, I was consistently relaxed. I was busy having the time of my life and pursuing other hobbies and interests and passions. So I wasn't exactly focused on studying. I wasn't doing practice papers and wasn't trying to achieve any goals. In fact, in my final exams for my first year, I actually failed quite a number of subjects. I remember scoring about 30 plus out of 100 for chemistry, and my tutor was so appalled. And for the second year, because I was slacking for the first year, I realized that I had a lot to catch up on, and I started becoming consistently hardworking. I did what all diligent and responsible students should have been doing right from the start and started properly studying for my second year. But why I say that this strategy I felt was ideal, even though it wasn't a strategy to begin with, it just happened for me, was because I realized that by the end of year 2, I was already feeling super burnt out, even though I had only properly studied for 1 year. So I would think that you should not consistently be super hardworking and super stressed out for 2 years. I don't think anybody will be able to handle that kind of mental torture and still do well in the exams. I'm not sure. Maybe some people are really used to studying and stressing out, but I think for most humans, you would need a good amount of rest. And I think the best time to rest will be the first year, because in your second year, you really have to put in your effort and be ready for the exam. Second thing I would say is to identify your strategy. There are quite a number of subjects. I don't think that everyone can master every single subject. I definitely couldn't. So I had to pick the subjects that I felt I could score better in, or that were more studyable, with inverted commas. What do I mean by studyable? I think it would be a subject that is more consistent and more objective. For instance, like math, chem, and bio. Why? Because for math, you either get the answer right or you get the answer wrong. There's no like subjective judgment in that sense. Like your number is either correct or wrong. Likewise for chem, the formula is either correct or wrong. And the same for bio. So I would consider these subjects to be easier to score. And so I labeled them as studyable subjects. And prioritize these subjects over the other subjects which I felt had more subjective elements to them. For math and chem, I believe that practice is the way to go, because you will not be able to remember all the formulas and the strategy for each question. Especially for math, the questions repeat themselves. They just come in a different form, or the number is different, but the pattern should be about the same, and you won't be able to recognize the patterns unless you do sufficient questions. So you should practice for math, and for chem as well. It's easier to remember the formulas and recall them quickly if you practice. So I think the whole point of practice is to help you recall faster. Of course, the first step is that you have to memorize certain things, right? You have to memorize certain basic facts. Like for chem, you have to memorize the formula. After memorizing, practicing helps you recall them quickly, and recalling them quickly is important because under time pressure, under stress during the exam, you won't want to spend time like trying to rack your brains of, oh, what was this formula about, or what was that formula about. You want it to come out without having to think too hard about it. Then for bio, I would say just memorize, because bio to me felt like it was just a memory game. You essentially memorize all the different steps. Like for instance, virus. What does a virus do? You just memorize step 1 to step 10, and then when you see the question in the exam, you just vomit everything you memorized. That to me was the way to study bio. And I didn't find it so effective to practice, because you have to spend a lot of time writing when you practice. And I think that time can be better spent if you tried to memorize everything that was on your notes. Yeah, like I said before, simply vomit every single thing into your bio paper, but of course vomit appropriately, and make sure that you vomit the keywords as well. What about subjects like GP? To me, it was just wing it because I find GP such a subjective subject that, it really depends on the examiner's opinion. If you happen to say something that doesn't really gel with what they think, then you have a harder time convincing them. So to me, it's like a 50-50. Just make sure that your grammar is perfect. Basic things about English, you should get it right. Grammar, spelling, the way you write your sentences. I think those things you can do on your part. And if you have already mastered that, I don't see how you should worry about that. And also, you can do your part by trying to read up on certain topics that you think may be tested for the A-levels. My strategy was to not study for GP until the very end. I think I'll do another video on how to study each subject, but yeah, this video is more of an overview of my approach towards the A-levels in general. Project work, just do as usual, do as how you would do a normal piece of work, and just do your best. It's hard to get a B, yet it might also be easy to get a B, especially if you're from a good school, because of the bell curve and just by the fact that, they need to give some people Bs. Some unlucky students may just end up getting B even though their work really deserves an A. So I don't know how to describe the fairness in all of this, but essentially do your best and prepare for your oral presentation. Just memorize as far as possible your script and speak without referring to your script too much. I think that's like the basic things that you can do to get through PW. If your group mates are not willing to work hard, please do not take the attitude that, okay, since they are slacking, and then I will slack as well. No, because PW is your grade, so I would encourage you to just put in the effort that they should have put in, even though it benefits them as well. Because most importantly, you have to benefit yourself, right? You cannot give up on the project simply because the rest of your group members are not playing their part. Okay, for econs, I also adopted the just pray and hope for the best mindset. I think it's actually studyable, but I feel that, the way the questions are phrased sometimes, it makes me stumble. It makes me unsure of what answers exactly I can use in my notes. Yeah, but I would say just as a basic and fundamental fact, you should memorize your fundamentals. For instance, there are certain paragraphs that you can memorize, like aggregate demand, aggregate supply, those standard paragraphs that will always come out regardless of the question. So you do your part by memorizing those. And if you are even better, you can memorize answers to standard questions, which I didn't because it was just too much effort, and I felt that generally my school did not have the best resources for us for econs. We didn't really have standard answers for questions, so it was really a think on the spot kind of situation. But econs is one subject that the time is really very tight during the exam. So it is really good if you are able to think of answers beforehand, before the exam, and be ready to vomit certain answers when you see certain questions. Yes. But honestly, my own econs A-levels experience was a complete disaster. Like, I didn't know how to answer one question that was a significant question. I didn't even know what to write. I wrote like 2 paragraphs. I think I just wrote 2 paragraphs of nonsense. I was not confident at all that I could get an A. I searched through the entire case study multiple times and could not find the answer. And it was just not in my head, the situation where like it's not even something that you can come up with because there's just nothing, no knowledge in the area at all. So that was econs for me. Yeah, maybe I should give you a brief like rundown of all the papers, how I felt after all the papers. Math, I felt okay for one paper, not so okay for second paper. In one of the papers, I actually copied the question wrongly. So I basically answered my own question, and that was quite a lot of marks. So I was also not confident of getting an A for that. Chemistry, one paper was particularly disastrous. I think it was paper C if I'm not wrong. I can't quite remember what all the papers are called, but yeah, the one with 3 questions and you can choose 2. Yeah, I just couldn't get a formula. I couldn't even answer. Like it was something that wasn't even taught in my syllabus, so I have no idea how to answer that question. So that was chem. And for the MCQ, I made a ton of careless mistakes as well. Like it was clearly careless mistakes because I did discuss it with my friend, and I just realized that yeah, I had a lot of careless mistakes for my chem MCQ paper. So also not confident of getting an A. Bio, yeah, bio I just had to answer an essay question that wasn't even taught. Like it wasn't even in the syllabus. There were certain short structured questions that were also not taught in my syllabus. I felt that my school then wasn't very prepared in terms of our notes. Our notes were just not adequate. They did not cover every single question. So even though I did study the full suite of notes that I was given, the answer was just not even to be found there. That was bio for me. For GP was a very interesting story. I read all the questions. None of them were questions or topics that I prepared for. So I told you previously that I only studied GP towards the end, right? And towards the end means like in the last 2 weeks before A levels. Yes, that's very risky, but yeah, that was my strategy. So or lack thereof, right? And essentially, when I saw the questions, I knew I was doomed because yeah, I wasn't prepared for any of them. But the way I tried to overcome it was to first stop panicking. Second, I tried to use whatever knowledge that I prepared for a different topic and fit it into the question that I was trying to answer. PW was okay for me. I felt that the presentation went well, and yeah, it was just an okay presentation. Econs I already previously mentioned, it was slightly disastrous. So yeah, in fact I came out feeling like I may not even get A for anything save for PW. So I hope this encourages those of you who feel terribly about your A levels. Okay, moving on. Should you play? Yes, I think definitely yes. So this will be linked to like how many hours to study. You just have to consider how many hours can you absorb. If you can absorb 8 hours worth of content, sure, go ahead and study for 8 hours. But if you can't, there's no point sitting there and making yourself miserable. Which is why I feel that you should incorporate some playtime as well to rest your mind. And your mind needs rest and needs sleep. It's super important to rest your mind because this is the first time, right, I experienced like some kind of mental stress that really gave me like a mind block during my one of my papers. I think it was bio MCQ. Yeah, my bio MCQ, my mind was completely blocked. I couldn't even process a question. I think because I was in such a panicked, stressed state that my mind completely shut down. That was during my actual A levels. I was reading the question without understanding the question, and I was just giving answers that just came to me. Like my mind definitely wasn't processing, and therefore I would say, right, that ultimately it was God's grace that I managed to still get A's for all my subjects. And it was the first time I really experienced like burnout and mind block during an exam. Like I was totally mortified, but there was nothing I could do because the time was so short for an MCQ. And I had to shade some answers, even if my mind was not exactly processing the questions. So please put in some playtime in order to de-stress, because a stressed out mind will definitely not work out well during the exam. Fifth question, should you do practice papers? Yes, this is very closely linked to my strategy. I will do practice papers for math and chem because practice for those things make perfect. As cliche as it sounds, but it really helps with the recall. Bio, no, because like I explained before, it just takes up too much time to write down the whole long chunk of things that you need to memorize. So just memorize and be ready to write it down. I don't think you really have to literally write it down as you practice. But MCQ, yes, I think you should practice because if I recall correctly, though my mind was so foggy during the exam, it seems like the questions were similar to 10-year series questions. Yeah, but I wasn't exactly very sure whether they were exactly the same. So they appeared similar, but I'm not sure whether they're exactly the same. Yes, so because of the similarity, I think you should practice the 10-year series for bio. GP, you already know my take. I felt it was pointless to practice. Every marker would say a different thing. And in all my 2 years, I've never gotten an A for GP. None of my teachers felt that I was capable of getting an A. And it was almost like an impossible feat, you know. So I say it's pointless to practice. And maybe one part that's useful would be the vocabulary part of GP. For econs, I also felt it was pointless. Wasting time writing down the whole answer. You just memorize the basic fundamentals. And memorize the different points. What affects supply, what affects demand, for instance, you know. Because all these points are more flexible in that when the question changes, you can change. You can choose, pick and select the points that fit the question. So memorize those. And also, don't forget to take note of your health. Please take care of your eyes. Don't allow your eyes to deteriorate just for A-levels, because it's definitely not worth it. You have to use your eyes for a lifetime, but the A-levels will not go with you for a lifetime. I can tell you how on hindsight A-levels is so useless. It only gets you to the interview room, and once you secure a spot there, the next thing that you'll be concerned about will be your university score. And yeah, your A-levels might be useful if you do really badly at university to the point where you need to prove your worth with your A-levels cert, which is unlikely the case, I suppose. If you are a top scorer for A-levels, I believe that you will do somewhat decently for your uni years as well. So I can tell you how insignificant the A-levels will be in time to come. So if in the event that you do not do perfectly well for your A-levels, please do not think that the world is over or the world is ending, because it isn't. And I have a friend who graduated from law school despite doing horribly for A-levels. There are always alternatives. And one thing that I think everyone should prepare are notes. This is for last minute revision and to refresh your memory. I didn't see the value of this at the start. I just simply wrote down as I studied. And I just wrote it down for fun. I'll make them colourful and pretty just for fun. But in the end, I did find it useful because when A-levels come, it's really tiring to read through all your notes from start to end. So it's good to have, a summary of everything or the things that you commonly would forget. Like things that you need to remind yourself of. This should be in your notes of commonly forgotten or commonly careless items. Yes, so especially for math, I was a very, very careless student. I would always make careless mistakes that would cause me to lose marks even though I actually know how to do the question and I actually understand what's going on. But because of my carelessness, I might even drop a grade. So what I did was I would note down all my careless ways in one piece of paper. So I will always read that right before I go in for my exam. Like, please check this, please check that, or take note of this, take note of that. Okay, so that's one thing that I would do for papers that, usually I make this mistake, the same mistake multiple times already. And you should also have a general set of notes that are not too heavy that you can just read through. Like, for instance, let's say the day before your chem exam, you have one day to read. What will you read? You can't read all your notes, right? So the set of notes that you make should be such that you can go through it in that one day and is sufficient to trigger your memory of important points that would likely be tested for the exam. 8 point, do not compare with your peers. Oh, this is so important because everyone has a different learning style, everyone goes at a different pace, and everyone has different goals. If I compared to my peers, I would have been in depression already, because by the first year of JC, most people were somewhat okay with all their subjects, but I was just a wreck. I was lost. I had no idea what I was doing at all. In the second year, when I was working really hard, some of my peers were judging me for studying hard. But, we all go at our own pace. Because I didn't study for the first year, I have to compensate in the second year, right? And eventually, it all works out. Because I have some peers, some friends who studied consistently from year 1 all the way. And by year 2, they could study at a comfortable pace. But as for me, I felt like I had to absorb the whole year of syllabus in the same year, at the same time, as I was trying to learn new things in the second year. It was quite a tough process, I would say. And my pace was just different from the rest. Also, I had different goals. I mean, I'm not super sure that I aim to get straight A's, but I'm super sure that I didn't want to fail anything. And I didn't want to let myself down because I know I was a kid who didn't really study for PSLE. I did score decently, but I didn't score my best. Yes, and my Sec 1 teacher did tell me that I need to stay focused if I want to fulfill my potential. She noticed that I was always daydreaming in class, which is true. So, yes, so we all have our own challenges, we all have different strengths and weaknesses. So please don't compare with your peers. And comparison is really the thief of joy. And just do what you think is best for you. Last thing, your general attitude I feel in terms of studying should be to find out the answers to questions that keep popping up. For instance, if you're doing math, the same questions will generally keep coming up. I remember there was a period of time where I didn't even know how to use the calculator to do integration. And each time I saw that question in the exam, I would manually try to integrate and get the answer wrong. Until I realized that, you could do it on the GC. So before I found out that I could do it on the GC, I was consistently getting the question wrong, which was quite stupid. So, yeah, if you see a question that keeps coming up and you don't know the answer to it, just find out. Because you don't want to have that same question come out in A-levels and blame yourself because you were too lazy to find out the answer earlier, right? So, yes, I would suggest that generally try to find out the answers to questions that keep coming up. And finally, please stay sane. Do not go insane studying. It's completely not worth it. Do not get depression from studying. It's also not worth it. There are many alternatives in life. I have seen people who did not score well who end up doing great things in life. So do not treat A-levels as a be-all and all thing. And there are people who score well who did not even manage to get into the dream school. Yes, you will be surprised by how arbitrary a lot of the admission interviews are. A perfect score that does not guarantee you a spot in your ideal school. And an imperfect score also does not guarantee that you will not be able to study the course that you want to study. So yes, please continue to stay hopeful and stay sane. And if you're going mad, talk to your friends, find a counselor. Your mental health, I can't emphasize enough, is always more important than your score. Your health in general is always more important because if you were to die tomorrow, would you be stressed about A-levels today? No. If you were to die tomorrow, all this won't matter. So do not stress yourself out to the point where you might possibly die tomorrow. If not, all your efforts will also simply go to waste. Yes, and most importantly, God loves you. God accepts you for who you are, for whatever score you score. Yes, that's all for now. See ya.